Frankenstein is a classic. I don't think anybody in the world could disagree with that statement. It is one of the first instances of science fiction ever written down and given proper consideration. It is well known throughout the world. It has influenced popular culture in every possible way, and everyone's heard of it in some way or fashion. Now, of course, I don't really want to focus on how it has influenced us throughout the years. Today, I want to look at it through a separate lens. I want to look at it through the lens of queer theory. But before we begin with that, it's probably best to go over some brief terminology here. So, with that in mind, let's look into what queer theory actually is as a starting point. Queer theory is the term given to a certain lens that we view topics through. That lens being how we view gender, sexuality, and other such topics throughout our modern life, and how we've seen it in literary criticism, such as we're doing right now, or sociology and history. Now, with that in mind, I'm pretty sure you get the idea of where I'm going with Frankenstein as a queer theory. But to further elaborate, I want to give a basic idea. I'm going to be looking at how the monster throughout the book is depicted as a symbol of a queer child and how they relate to other characters throughout the book, most notably Frankenstein himself and the family whose house he hides under. Now, you may be wondering, how could the monster be a symbol of a queer child? The best way to look at it is that the monster isn't a monster in the terms we think of. Throughout the story, Mary Shelley takes great pains to explain that the monster is, for all purposes, human. They don't look the same, and they have very different experiences than the typical human growth, but they have emotions, they have thoughts, they learn, they develop, they explore, they're curious, they want attention, they want connection. So, for most purposes, they are human. I mean, the fact they show empathy is a huge development for them. It shows that they can sympathize with other beings, not just themselves. In other words, they can see themselves in others. Now, with that in mind, let's look at how the monster experiences their life. Their first real experience alive is their essentially father being terrified of them, running away, trying to hide away from them. They are seen as unnatural and they are terrified of it. Now, I don't know about you, but have you ever seen a young child come out to their parents as gay or trans or anything, and the parents are just unsupportive as anything? The parents call them unnatural. The parents say they need to be fixed. Sounds the same when you think about it. The monster is a child. And in the literal sense of what queer actually originally meant, which is just strange, they are. They are a strange child. Because technically speaking, they both are and aren't a child. They're fully grown, but they still have the mind of a child. But in the way we're looking at it, this same effect happens. They are separated from the people that should care about them, should teach them how to survive, should love them, care for them, should help them throughout their life. So, what does the monster do? Does it go in anger and try and kill? Does it fight? Does it? No. The first thing it does is goes up to his room and stares at him. And it realizes, oh, you, you're like me. Of course, the Frankenstein does not see this to be true, but it's alive. Wouldn't it be? It's natural for something alive and human to seek out others, to seek out connections. Humans are a social species, and when given the chance to connect, we do just that. We connect. So, the monster, who I'm going to just go ahead and refer to as Adam throughout the rest of this, because he refers to himself as Adam to Frankenstein's god. So I'm going to refer to the monster as Adam, if that's fine. Adam exists alone and afraid. His father, you can hear the quotation marks, hates him, sees him as an abomination. The monster understands this and runs. Frankenstein is, for all intents and purposes, a parent who does not accept their gay child, or similar. Doesn't necessarily have to be gay, but you understand the point I'm making. Adam runs and finds the forest. He lives in the forest for a period of time. He explores, he learns, he becomes like his father in that he's exceptionally curious. And yes, I am going to be referring to Frankenstein as his father. Get over it. He is a curious person who wants to understand what he sees. He sees humans and he wants to know what they are doing, who they are. He wants to forge a connection. He doesn't want to be alone. He doesn't want to be the only one like himself. Now, with this in mind, I think it's important we look at Frankenstein himself. Frankenstein. Oh God, Frankenstein. Frankenstein, I think, could easily be seen as someone who is themselves queer coded, but is in exceptional denial about it. What I mean by this is that a lot of LGBT people begin their journey thinking about how wrong it is. They think it's unnatural because part of them at least, knows that's them. They rebel because they've been taught to. They've been taught throughout their life that that's not normal. That shouldn't be normal. But of course it is. And you can't fight who you are. You will lose. Either, both ways really. You just have to accept it. But, with that in mind, Frankenstein could easily be seen as someone who is deep into that denial. They do not want to accept it. So what do? They push it onto something else. In this case, Frankenstein puts it on Adam. He puts everything he sees as wrong with himself onto Adam. He is the abomination. He is the one that's messed up, even though Frankenstein's the one that gave him life. Just think of how this would feel for a child to see their own parent hating themselves and then pushing it onto the child for being somewhat like them. That is a terrible thing to see and imagine. It's horrifying. And sadly, it's still something that happens to this day. Of course, Frankenstein does hilariously meet with individuals who are similar to him in that it's not exactly hard to imagine them being queer as well, notably his friend Henry Carville, and the individual he meets near the end of his journey, Robert Walton, the captain we begin the book following. Robert is a lot clearer. If you read the letters Robert leaves to his sister, it becomes very clear there's more going on behind his eyes than he admits. Just look at how Robert describes Frankenstein throughout his letters. It's very clear there's more than a interest of friendship. Trust me on this. The important part I want to put into this is that Robert and Henry are examples that queer individuals are not inherently different. They exist alongside everybody. They are human. They have their own desires, their own fears, their own wants. Again, they're just human. Now, with examples of queer individuals living normal lives, we have to come full circle to talk about the family that Adam hides with. The family whose home he resides under for a period of several months. This is the family that unwittingly taught him how to speak and read English and helped him to understand what he was. This family, Adam shows that he wants what they have. He wants the family they exist in. He wants to have that life, to be normal. But that's not something he can ever have. Because in the story, he is a monster. But in reality, it's a life a queer individual can't have because most of the time they're ostracized from those that care about them. They are pushed away. They are not given the chance to form these connections. They lose the family that they want, and any chance they have at it is slim to none, meaning that that individual has to change plans. They have to find their own path and make their own family. They they may never have a child in the normal sense. They may never have a partner in the normal sense. So how could they have the normal family? You're beginning to see the issues. Adam understands that he cannot have this life. He knows that he is strange. He knows he can never exist this way. He knows he will never have this life, no matter how much he wants it, no matter how he wants to be normal. Adam is very much a queer individual, accepting that they are different. They will never have the life they are expected to have, the life they've been raised to have, because it's just not an option. Of course, individuals in this scenario in the real world take a different stance with this. Not being able to have that normal family, queer individuals make their own. They may find it in communities, they may find it in partners that are not seen as normal. They may adopt a child, which is not seen as normal, even though it is a common occurrence. They find their own path and make their own future. The ideal family is something that for a queer individual is not something that can be accomplished without them losing who they are on a fundamental level. So, so Adam is the individual. To bring this back to Adam, it's important to know that he is very much a queer individual. Not in the sense we think of, but he is. He cannot have this ideal family. He does not have a supportive parent. He is not given the opportunity to exist a happy life, even though through Walton and Clerval, it's very clear that they can have said happy life. It's just not the normal life, not the one we think of when we hear of family. They find family elsewhere and they pick what they define family as. In other words, Adam finds a community, or at least he tries to create one. Hence his desire for Frankenstein to make one like him. He doesn't want to be alone, which is a very human emotion. Again, emphasizing that Adam is human, even though he himself describes him as another species. He is fundamentally human. Adam is the human given form who is different. Adam is the human who knows very well they are not normal. Adam is the human who knows there's no one else like him. So he wants to find some. But in his case specifically, he cannot. Because fundamentally, they do not exist. So what does he do? He asks to try and create one. Which, we need to specify that this is where this story diverges from actual queer individuals, because that devolves into turning a non-queer individual into a queer individual, which is not how reality works. Multiple studies have shown. Yeah, it's important to note that. This is where the story splinters from reality. Because Adam has to actually make someone like him. And not knowing how, asked he asked the person who knows, the one who made him, Frankenstein himself. So of course, when Frankenstein eventually decides to destroy this other individual, Adam becomes enraged not from pure anger at promise being broken, but from anger that his last chance at not being alone for the rest of his life has just been erased. From knowing that he will truly be alone for the rest of his existence, that there will never be anyone like him who accepts him for who he is. Adam is very easily seen as a queer analogy, and this is something that we see even today, sadly. This is something that has not died down in the years since. This is something that we still have individuals being thrown out of their homes because they are not normal. And honestly, I think that makes the book even more important today. Because even after all these years, after everything we've learned, humans are still just as bad at throwing out the unknown. We are just as bad at erasing what does not fit our standard of normal. And honestly, I think that's why Frankenstein is shown to be such a classic. Because no matter where you are in life, that story still holds true. There are still people out there like Adam who are thrown out, who are hidden from everyone, who have to remain silent, who don't know if there's anyone else like them out there. So, I think that's why queer reading works so well for Frankenstein. Because we still see its effects to this day. And maybe that's why it still influences our pop culture so much. That might also be why every adaptation of the book portrays Adam not as who he is, as this individual who's strange and different from the normal, but as a monster.